What'd you hear on drugs today from the folks?
First of all, I heard a lot of support for HR 3. It's the Democratic package to lower drug costs, allow Medicare to negotiate for prescription drug pricing, tag the inflation of prescription drugs. Also, it puts a cap on for Medicare beneficiaries to $2,000 a year, and sets up penalties, holds pharmaceutical companies accountable. You know, 1 in 4 people either don't take the right amount of drugs or forego taking their prescription drug pricing purely because of price issues with drugs. And when you think about this, these are life-saving preventative measures. And when you talk about the overall healthcare costs, keeping people out of hospitals, keeping them out of the doctor's offices. And so this is an important piece of legislation. You know, I came to Congress to work on issues that affect the lives of my constituents. Healthcare costs and prescription drug costs is the #1 issue I hear about every single day. So proud that we're working on this important piece of legislation, and it was great. Most importantly, I've spent a lot of time this week working on healthcare issues, and these roundtables are so important for me because they allow me to hear from my constituents from the bottom up on how what we're working on in Washington has consequences back here. And, you know, if there's things that we're gonna be negotiating as this bill moves its way through Congress, I wanna be able to go back and fight with information directly from the ground here. And so it was really important for me to have this roundtable to specifically talk about this piece of legislation.
Was there anything from the roundtable that you found surprising that you weren't aware of? Anything from, you know, you have different constituents from various backgrounds and groups. So was there anything that really stuck out to you, like you said, you're gonna take back to Washington?
Yeah, there was one particular issue that was surprising. It's called the 340B program, where pharmaceutical companies are supposed to provide a rebate for hospitals that are dealing with a disproportionate amount of low-income residents. And so there's some concerns with respect to nonprofit insurance plans on that impact. And so that was just something that was, you know, that's interesting to know and be able to negotiate on. The getting really into the weeds on that, but it's a good, again, unintended consequences, look at it. And so it's good to have these forums so you can understand that.
Does this have bipartisan support in the House?
Listen, I think that anything that deals with healthcare costs and prescription drug pricing has there is bipartisan concern, and certainly ins and outs we will negotiate. But yes, listen, you know as well as I that this is a divided time in this country, but prescription drug pricing is one area where I think we must come together and pass something.
Congresswoman, we've seen quite a few of your congressional colleagues, particularly the ones running for president, come into town and speak with voters here, generally in broad strokes, on what they want to do in healthcare, whether they talk about Medicare for all or Medicare for all who want it, or all sorts of variations of Medicare. What do you need to hear from your colleagues and these candidates, and what do you think your constituents here in Nevada need to hear from them on what specifically they intend to do and intend to accomplish when it comes to things like prescription drug prices?
I think probably the most important thing when it comes to prescription drug prices is getting the control of pharmaceutical companies out of the arena and making sure that we're working for the American people, and we're taking on and we're holding them accountable. Ultimately, when you talk about prescription drugs, it comes to prices. Nevada has led the way in terms of transparency. We've seen insulin go through the roof. We've seen prices that have been in the market for years and years and years have incredible inflation. And that's coming out of the pockets of my constituents. And so we want to hold pharmaceutical companies accountable. And to your point, Jeff, this is a bipartisan issue.
If I may switch topics.
Yes.
You wrote an op-ed in the RG on impeachment. Why did you feel it was important to write the op-ed?
I think that there is a lot of confusion around this, and I think people need to understand my thought process and why I came out to support an impeachment inquiry. And you know, I think I need to make it clear that this was a decision that I arrived at through a lot of thought and deliberation. It wasn't something I rushed into, and it's a sad and somber decision. I mean, there's two important, the most sober decisions a congressperson will make is to send men and women off to war, and whether or not to proceed with an impeachment inquiry. And so I felt it was important for me to explain my thought process to my constituents.
And on that note, we've seen the president and his allies get this message out that, you know, if House Democrats continue down this road with the impeachment inquiry, that somehow that will prevent any kind of bipartisan deal on gun violence or anything on healthcare, prescription drugs. What do you need, you know, constituents here in Nevada, and I guess the rest of the country, to know about how you and your House colleagues are trying to, you know, essentially, I believe it was Senator Chris Murphy when he was here last week said, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Listen, you know, if anyone is threatening to move forward an agenda for the American people because of the impeachment inquiry, that needs to fall at their feet. And I am here working on prescription drug pricing, I'm working on healthcare, I'm working on student debt. I will continue to do my work for my constituents in addition to what is happening with this inquiry. So I think that is a really dangerous proposal that the Republicans are saying that that we're going to hold it up. We're not holding anything up. I mean, we're moving forward on this, where our committees are going to work on this. We're going to move this legislation as we have. I mean, we've passed over 250 bills, major pieces of legislation. And by the way, universal background checks, that bill is sitting and has been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk since February. And so we have made progress. We have passed bills. We have passed Violence Against Women Act, Equal Pay for Equal Work. We, raised the Wage Act. We have passed HR 9, Climate Action Now. So there have been the Equality Act, major pieces of legislation that have had bipartisan support that are sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. So I don't accept the challenge that we are not getting our job done, because we've actually passed far-reaching legislation in the past 6 months, and we will continue to do exactly that moving forward.
What have you heard from your constituents about impeachment? What have they told you?
Listen, I mean, I have constituents who don't agree, and I have constituents who do. And the bottom line is I support an inquiry, and I support us collecting the facts. Basically the president admitted during this phone call with Zelensky that he was willing to abuse the power of his office to ask the president of a foreign country to gather dirt on a political opponent which would interfere in our elections. To me, that is an offense that needs to be investigated, and Congress, pending that investigation, must act on that. And as I said in my op-ed, for me the tipping point was really the administration interfering in the release of the whistleblower complaint. And that, to me, on top of what the president admitted, what was in the transcript of the phone call, but on top of that, the attempt to, we have whistleblower laws to protect. This is a dedicated public servant who has dedicated his or her life to the national security of this country. And we have a law that's supposed to protect them and set out a clear process. And the fact of the matter is that whistleblower complaint was 3 weeks late at that time. And so there were clear laws that clearly delineate the steps that need to be taken. And so to me, not only the abuse of power, but also the obstruction are serious offenses that it is my constitutional duty to make sure that we uphold the values and the laws of our country. And I don't take this decision lightly. I think it's a very somber time for our country, obviously very divisive. And, not everyone in my district's gonna agree with my decision, but it was the right decision to make.
How do you, I only bring this up just into the public opinion. I think Republicans are gonna be protesting out front tomorrow. I don't know how many, but they're gonna have an event in front of your office tomorrow. Which gets me to the question of, you're in a district that has swung Democrat, it's swung Republican. Any concerns that this could cost you your seat? Any concerns that this could make the election difficult for you?
Jeff, when I came into office, first of all, you and I know that impeachment was not the reason I was elected. I was elected to really work on exactly what I've been working on this week. How are we gonna lower healthcare costs? How are we gonna lower prescription drug costs? How are we gonna get students out of the crush of student debt? I mean, those are issues that I continue to work on, and this was certainly not at the top of my agenda. But given the facts that I was presented with, it's the right thing to do. And I always say this, there's three things that I will do when I vote. One is, how does it impact the constituents of my district? And when it comes to national security, I think this is a number one, a national security risk, but also, we cannot have foreign influence. Our founding fathers, we cannot have foreign influence in our democracy, in our elections. So upholding the integrity of our Constitution is first and foremost. The second is, does this move our country forward? And certainly this is a divisive decision to make, but ultimately we have to protect the Constitution of the United States and the integrity of our democratic process. And then finally, is it the right thing to do? Can I, with my values and my morals, can I uphold that decision? And, this wasn't a decision that I weighed on what the outcome on my election would be. I was elected to do this. I was elected to uphold the Constitution, and so that's the decision I made.
So,
Guys, one more question.
Can I have a question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Veterans.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we have millions of veterans that faces the problem that the VA have changed the way they order the prescription. They cannot order the prescription until the due date. And in between the dates, those times, and also the processing of the shipping of the pill to them, okay, those times maybe cost 5 to 10 days. And those 5-10 days occurred. How those if the medicine is very critical to a person, matter life and death.
Mm-hmm.
Those 5 days or 10 days could cause a really tremendous difference, and also the cost. Do you have any way that you can help out those millions of veterans in the United States to overcome this problem?
Yes, we can certainly talk to you about moving some legislation, writing some letters to the VA, and certainly providing oversight to make sure we're moving forward on that and address that issue. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.